So, tonight is June the 5th. It's the week of June the 3rd. I put my schedules together by the week of. So tonight is June the 5th. This is ECP 3703, Managerial Economics. And we have available to us problem sets 1 through 4. Problem set 5 is a repetition of problem set 3, so if you don't get to it, don't worry about it. If I change it and create a new problem set 5, I'll announce that on Canvas. It'll be just a few extra problems to practice with. Okay? Is there anything in particular any of you would like to address in terms of the homework, in terms of the class, in terms of the administration, anything at all? Yes?
Problem set 3, question 1.
Okay, let me grab that one. Problem set 3, question 1.
Yeah, when you get down to the elasticity of the demand, I'm wondering what numbers you're actually using to get the
To do the calculation?
the quantity calculations, because I'm not getting the same answers.
Let's see. Problem set 3, question 1. Let me see what we got on the solution handout. Does anybody have you all worked problem set 3, question 1? Anybody not worked it? You want to work through it real quick?
I haven't worked through it.
Let's do it real quick. It's kind of a short problem. It's one of the, what I've been calling the break-even type problem, at least the initial part of it. It says you've got a business center and you have $486,000 in fixed costs, and you have a variable cost of $2,350 per patient that you attend to. And the first question is, if you anticipate that your price will be $4,000, how many patients have you got to see in order to break even? And so the concrete, always here it is, break-even solution, break-even, is equal to your fixed costs divided by your contribution margin. The contribution margin is the price minus the variable cost per customer. Now think of it this way, if you will. Every time you treat a patient, you make $4,000. And you incur a cost of $2,350. So that means for every patient you see, you have what, $1,650 left over above your variable cost. And that's what we call the contribution margin. It means for every customer or patient that you see, you have $1,650 left over to help defray your fixed costs. And once you get those paid, then it'll be used as profit. So we take the contribution margin, divide it into the fixed costs, and then we turn to the answer sheet, so Strickland doesn't have to do any calculations, and it's 295 patients. Okay so far? Think about that. If you were running this let's say, clinic, and people are coming in for whatever, CAT scans, etc., and you say, we have to see 295 patients a year to break even. What does that do in your mind to your planning and the management of this clinic? What does 295 patients a year mean to you?
You think of it in terms of supply and the employees that you need.
Absolutely, you're going to do an entire workflow analysis of even before the patient comes in, how are we contacted by them? what kind of references or what's the word I want? Referrals are doctors using to send them to us. Then we're going to say, once they arrive at the clinic, what are the specific steps they have to go through? What is the smoothest way to make that happen? In many cases, we know, for example, we ask them to fill out paperwork before they arrive, as an example. And we want to take that entire workflow and smooth it out and make it as efficient as possible, and ultimately see how few people we can use to work. So that's one part. The other part might be, for example, 295 patients. How many patients is that? That's almost one a day, isn't it? 365 days a year? Except we're not open 7 days a week. Let's say that we're open 5 days a week, and we are closed effectively 3 weeks a year, between holidays and vacations or whatever. So we only have 49 weeks, right? So what's that? 5 times 49. 245 days?
Yes.
So we need to see a little bit more than one patient a day to break even. Or if you want to think of it, maybe we need to see 8 patients, I'm guessing here, 8 patients per week to break even. And again, this is approximately. And so as we look at our bookings, as we book patients to be coming in, we're keeping a track of how are we doing in terms of break even, because that's our first concern. And if we see that we are comfortably bringing in 17 patients a week, we know approximately how much profit we're looking at, and then we can start making decisions on what are we going to do with that profit. What are our 2 basic choices? Assume that you and I own this business. What are our 2 basic choices of what to do with the profit in that business?
Reinvest.
Reinvest it, or
Invest in other.
keep it. Pay it to ourselves as a bonus or in salaries or whatever else. We assume that the 486 fixed cost includes our basic salary. So out of that profit, we may say that we'll take 20% of it and distribute it among us owners, or we might build an incentive plan and say that for the employees in the business with us, we'll build in a profit-sharing basis for them. We'll take 10% of the profit and divide it among the employees every so often, every quarter, every 6 months, every year. Or we might plan other ideas, new equipment we need to purchase. If we're getting that busy, do we need more employees? Do we need, in fact, to look at expanding the facility? And then we might try some off-the-wall stuff. We might say, what's the best way to keep our employees highly motivated and very customer-friendly? And maybe that means we'll take 1 week a year and we'll take everybody down to I don't know, Cancun and spend a week on the company. But none of that starts until we know what we got to do to survive. And so that's my reason for throwing the kind of break-even problems in here. Now, there's another calculation in there about what happens if your fixed costs change. So you have a different number up here, or what happens if your variable costs change. Sometimes we do that, which changes your contribution margin. Those are minor. This problem says, what if instead of the initial data, let's keep that handy, at $4,000, we needed 295 patients. And then we said, well, if we change the price to $4,350 per patient, our break-even would drop to 243. Okay? Well, those are 2 points on a demand curve. Right? That's like saying at a price of $4,000, we need 295. At a price of $43.50, we need 243. So here's a point, whoops, over here. And that describes generally what we need our demand curve to be. And so the third part of the question says, what sort of price elasticity of demand is implied by this. And so now you have to go back to microeconomics and remember how to calculate price elasticities. Anybody worked on this and comfortable with it?
Use the midpoint formula?
Huh? I use the midpoint formula. And I use it this way. The price elasticity of demand is the percentage change in quantity over the percentage change in price, always. And I calculate the percentage change this way. It's the change in quantity over the average quantity divided by the change in price over the average price. So percentage change is the change over the average. To me, that's a very quick and easy calculation. Okay? In this case, I'm going to erase these numbers since I've got them on the graph. My price elasticity of demand that is implied from my calculations is that the change in quantity from 243 to 295 is what? 52?
Yes.
And how do I find the average between those two?
I'm saying divide by 2.
Add them up, divide by 2. I got an average, and it appears that I've got a mistake on my answer sheet, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, my answer sheet says 48. Well, let's see what the average is. What is the average here? Anybody calculate it?
269.
269. So there are some errors here on the answer sheet for this problem. 269. Good. And then when I do the same thing for the price, the change in price is $350, and the average price is $41.75. I managed to get that correct. So then I'm going to, being a public school student for math, I'm not going to be able to do this longhand, so I'm going to get a calculator, right? And when I calculate these numbers, what am I going to get? $52 over 269. I get 0.1933. 350 divided by 4175, 0.0838. That's an implied price elasticity of 2.3, and it's actually a negative number. They're always a negative number for the price elasticity. Does that take you through your question?
Yes.
Okay.
That last part was,
Since we know that Strickland screwed up the answer sheet, right? Now that we've got that corrected, it's not too bad. But what does that mean? I mean, suppose you did this and you found, wow, that implies the price elasticity of demand has got to be about 2.3. What help is that number?
elastic or inelastic.
It's an elastic demand, which is good. We want to be in the elastic range of demand. We never want to operate in the low part of the demand curve in the inelastic range. Because if you're down in there, you're underpricing yourself. If you're not clear on why I said that, go back and study elasticities again. Basically, if you raise price, you make more money. So at least we're figuring to be in the elastic range, but the next thing we might do is see if we can find any studies, marketing studies, about responses to different prices for this sort of product or service. And if through some trade journals or through a place like the University of Florida, maybe one of the professors over there is doing research on this sort of thing and he's developed this sort of data. And if we found, for example, that they estimate that between these prices for this kind of business, that the price elasticity of demand generally runs somewhere around 2.0 to 2.4, hey, pretty good. That sounds like we're dealing with reality. If they say, no, the price elasticity of demand is really around 1.2 to 1.4, well, that's probably pretty good news. That's a more inelastic demand. So we may be in better shape. And if we're selling to patients, we're selling healthcare, what do we know about the demand for healthcare as a general rule? Elastic or inelastic?
Elastic.
Fairly inelastic, okay? So that's all I'm trying to do with this particular problem, is you can calculate the break-even, how many patients do we need, and that's got some managerial implications. You can calculate what the price elasticity of demand would have to be, at least, in order to make your price change work, and then you go out and see if you can find any kind of information on the market to see if that seems like a reasonable thing to charge the $4,350 price. Okay? I can imagine on an exam, I would ask you to do all the calculations, and I would ask you, what does this price elasticity imply? Okay?
So you're like paying attention to the negative in front of there?
Yeah, well, the price elasticity of demand is always a negative number. Because anytime the price goes up, the quantity goes down. So you get a positive and a negative change. Frequently in studies, they don't put the negative. They figure if you're smart enough to be reading the study, you recognize it's a negative number. Other times, they're very conscientious about it and they put it there, but
So
you
for
and I need
example,
to
if
remember.
sometimes you forget to put it on an exam, that means, is it gonna be wrong, or?
No, as long as your comments about it are correct. It would be better to put the negative on it,
Yeah.
okay? All right, that's one question, that's one good example in the way of test preparation. And perhaps a good argument for, if you're doing these things and you're looking at the answer sheets and you're not being able to come up with the same answers, probably should be working with one or two other students, and if you still can't come up with the same answers I did, email me, let me know, let me go check it. Okay? What else? I have a sense that there's a few people not here tonight because they misread the schedule.
That's a little early.
How's that?
It's 5:30. A lot of people get off at 5. So
Could be, but usually when I come in at 5:30, there's 8 or 9 of y'all here. But because we met last week, I think many people thought we didn't meet this week. They didn't look at the schedule.
It's also Wednesday.
I'm sorry?
It's also Wednesday.
And it's a change to a Wednesday, which may inconvenience some people. Yeah. Okay, other questions in particular on your part?
I didn't understand in problem set 2, number 2,
Problem set 2, number 2.
cannibalization, is the term used to describe the cause. Does it have something that we can solve?
Imagine this. If I'm selling 2 cereals, breakfast cereal, and I don't know if these are made by the same company or not because I don't pay attention, but suppose I'm selling Raisin Bran, and then I introduce a new cereal called, I don't know,
Conflicts?
cornflakes, good enough. I introduce some cornflakes. If normally I'm selling 1,000 boxes a day of my cereal, but when I introduce this and I sell 400, sales here decrease to say 600. That's cannibalization. These sales took away from those sales. Cannibalization, when you eat your own or you eat your same species. And what does that say about these products? How are they related?
Substitute?
They're substitutes. People choose one or the other. And for substitutes, the question says, what does it say about the cross elasticity of demand? Sigma is my symbol for the cross elasticity. Let's say between Raisin Bran and cornflakes. Because they are substitutes, it will be a positive number. Okay? I don't know exactly what the number might be. I could calculate it. But the bigger the number, the more cannibalization is going to occur. That's important. The larger the cross price elasticity, the more your products, which are competitors, but they're both produced by you, the more one will subtract from or cannibalize from the other. Okay? Should we be selling products that are substitutes?
If the market calls for it.
If there's enough buyers out there, if we don't sell them cornflakes, somebody else is. So sure. Okay, anything else? Specific questions? Well, hell, then I'm going out and get a beer.
On one of the cost, are you gonna go over cost curves today? Or-
Yeah, let's do that for a minute. Let's see if I can find a reference to it that works well.
Okay, I understand how to calculate the profit, but on one of the videos you showed you use an example where marginal cost was constant.
Right.
Are you gonna like do one where it's not constant,
I might,
or at least test them?
I might. Let's kind of review what we would do. Typically, and this would be the kind of long, extensive problem that would make up 50, 70% of an exam, because it's got so many parts to it. And let's just outline it. First thing I give you is 2 data points. Price 1, quantity 1, price 2, quantity 2. And from that, you have to develop or construct a straight line demand curve. Now that's what you started off doing in the problems. Everybody clear with that? Okay. Once you've got your straight line demand curve, I might from that ask you, what is the quantity then at different prices? And that's pretty easy. You just plug the price into the demand curve and say, oh, here's the quantity. Once you have different quantities at different prices, I could ask you to calculate the elasticity, price elasticity of demand between 2 prices. Much as we just did with the break-even problem. We doing okay so far? Okay. Here's where it starts getting tricky. Let's make up a demand equation. I figured out that my demand equation is 1,450 minus 2.6p. That's an example. I want to be able to do a couple of things. First, I want to be able to find the marginal revenue equation for this. Here's where it gets tricky. To find marginal revenue, I've got to convert this to its inverse statement or its inverse equation. Convert to the inverse demand. What that means is to restate this equation as P equals blah, 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 blah. It's a little basic algebra, right? Let's see if I can do this without screwing it up too bad, right? How would I change that to the inverse demand? One thing is I could rewrite it. I could say 2.6p equals 1450 minus QD. You okay with that? Everybody comfortable with that? You catch me if I make a mistake now. Because if I screw this up real bad, I'll just edit it out of the video. Now I'm going to divide both sides by 2.6. So I'm going to get P is equal to whatever the math is. Is that, no, that's not my, I hear somebody's alarm going off. I'm always worried it's mine and I'm in trouble because I screwed something else up. Can you imagine that? Oh, let's see, 1450 divided by 2, whoops, 1450 divided by 2.6, 0.3, that ain't right. Help me out here if you can. I get 557.69 minus, what's QD divided by 2.6? How do you do that?
1 divided by 2.6.
1 divided by 2.6. Take the inverse. 0.3846 QD. There's my inverse demand equation. Okay, I took the inverse of 2.6. 1 divided by 2.6, 0.3846. That's the inverse demand. The marginal revenue is the same equation, except the slope is twice as steep. So the marginal revenue is 557.69 minus 0.7692 QD. That's big deal important. Marginal revenue is, just write it down here, 55769 minus 7692 QD. You would think that I would know well enough to turn my ringer off, eh? So, this takes us to the point where you're ready to ask me about costs. And where we do this is typically we say, what is their profit maximizing output and price? How should they maximize profit? And I use a symbol pi for profit, okay? And the rule for profit maximization is set marginal revenue equal to marginal cost. And so we have to have a cost function. The easy one to do is a constant cost. And then I know that's in at least one of the questions I gave you. If you're told, for example, it costs, I don't know, $900 to produce each unit. Well, that's your marginal cost, the cost of one additional unit. So we got marginal cost equal 900. So now, for profit maximization, and I'm running out of room, for profit maximization, we would say 900 equals 557.69 minus 0.7692 QD. We would then solve this equation for QD. Anybody can do that real quick? $900 minus 557.69. Yeah. Try it again, Strickland. Is 342.31. And then you would divide by 0.7692. Darn it. You get 1.3 units. That's because I was making up numbers and they're not really very reflective, but that's the math.
Would that be negative since you divided by
No,
negative some? Since you divided by negative 0.7692.
sure it does. Sure looks like it. So this would not be a problem I'd give you on a test. I'll work them out first to be sure the answers come up reasonable. But do you see the process? We got to go down and figure out the demand equation. Then we got to figure out the inverse demand. Then we got to figure out the marginal cost. Then we have to set the marginal cost equal to marginal revenue. And I think there's at least one problem in the problem sets that has you do exactly that and shows it in the solution manual. Okay? That is a monster question. Because I've got you doing the demand curve, the elasticities, building the inverse demand, solving for profit maximization. So you can expect a problem along these lines that will account for the bulk of the exam. It might be 50% of your exam. And there will be partial credit along the way as long as you show me step by step what you're doing.
How would you answer that if that marginal cost wasn't constant? If it wasn't 900?
Good. Let's change that just for a minute. I need to erase this. Everybody got your notes done? Can I erase this?
No.
Okay. Sometimes your cost, and they'll do it maybe like this, the cost of output for Q is, and it might be 6,000 plus 4Q plus 8Q squared. And so it looks like an ugly equation. So what we're going to do is we're going to just put one toe in the water called calculus. Okay? This is the total cost function for production. Whatever Q is, you plug it in and you say, oh, that's how many dollars it cost me. The marginal cost function is the first derivative of this function with respect to Q. Now, taking the first derivative is a simple process. Trust me, we'll see it in a couple of seconds. Okay? First thing, anything that doesn't have a Q in it drops out. Second thing, we take the exponent of Q and multiply it by the coefficient and reduce the exponent by one number. Q is really Q to the first power. So I'm going to go 1 times 4 is 4, and this then becomes Q to the 0. What is anything to the 0 power? Huh? 1. So that's it. Then I go to the next term. Exponent times the coefficient, 2 to 8 is 16. Reduce the coefficient to 1. Q to the 1 is just Q. Bingo, there's my cost function, my marginal cost function. That's as far as I'll make you go. Oh, I might have another one. What if we had another term out here? 13Q to the third. What would be the next step?
3 times 13.
3 times 13 is 39.
And then Q does 2.
Q to the second. Feeling pretty good? Try this one. Plus 9Q to the fourth. What would you have?
36Q3.
36Q to the third.
So
You see how we take the marginal cost function, the
so
first
we
one?
pretty much minus it by 1, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So we wouldn't have to set it equal to marginal revenue and find?
You know, that once you had marginal cost, then you would set this equal to marginal revenue
Okay,
and solve for Q.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Which gets pretty messy if I've got you out here with a lot of powered Qs. I won't.
Okay.
This is not a math class, believe it or
So
not.
maybe like Calc 3.
I'm sorry?
Maybe like Calc 3.
Yeah, we don't need to do that. Okay? Now, suppose you've got a business, back to our little clinic with patients, etc. You've got to be able to track what the cost is for each patient, but I gave it to you in that first problem, didn't I? You remember that? I said the cost for each patient was $2,350. That's the cost for each extra patient. That's the marginal cost. So I could even weave in a break-even question into this thing if I wanted to. And imagine you were working and running and owning this clinic. How would you figure out the cost for every patient who comes through? You'd have to figure out exactly the workflow, exactly what has to happen, and what costs are associated with that person. What about the receptionist sitting in the front desk? Is he or she a part of the marginal cost of each patient?
Yes.
Every time you have one more patient, does she cost you more money? She's part of your fixed cost. So you would be trying to identify what are the extra costs my company has every time one patient comes in to get whatever. And if you could figure out that, and you said, gee, the marginal cost is $2,350, well, that means any price above $2,350, you know you're making money on that patient to help pay your fixed cost. But if you found yourself charging $2,000 and a marginal cost of $2,350, what's the economics term for that? Stupid. Okay? So one of the things you've got to do in operating any business, particularly a for-profit business, is you've got to be able to wade into everything that occurs and attach a cost to it. What is the cost of that? And you've got to keep very clear in your mind, what's the difference between my fixed costs and my marginal or variable costs? And if you can imagine the detail required in analysis, the days and weeks you might spend watching every patient come through and seeing exactly what happens. How many Q-tips did we use? How many Band-Aids? How many syringes? Okay, you've got to track that for many, many patients and at least get an average. Okay? You've got to know the marginal cost of every patient coming through to make sure you're making enough money to pay for them and your fixed costs. That's probably my whole lecture on costs right there. Cool. 2 birds, 1 stone. What else is on your mind? Anything?
Going back to the subject on substitutes,
Yeah, substitutes.
would that be a good tactic for companies to open up like areas of other products that they're interested in and maybe weed out a product that's not as...
Absolutely. And many times you might think of substitutes this way. I'm a chiropractor, and there's another chiropractor down the street. What if I just bought him out?
True.
Yeah. Or what if we went into partnership?
If they allow that.
If they allow it, yeah, because there are antitrust laws about, consolidating too much market power in the hands of a single seller or too few sellers. But yeah, the idea, and this is sort of the strategic approach to business, is to say, who are your competitors? Who are your substitutes? And if they're your competitors, what can you do about them? Well, we can either outcompete them or we can buy them.
It's like what some hospitals do. My dad's a physical therapist, and like a lot of the doctors that referred patients to him just built their own physical therapy clinic and just
That's right.
kept them there.
And if let's take that as an example. If you're a physical therapist and patients are being referred to you, and now many of the doctors who used to refer you patients are opening up their own physical therapy capability, how are you going to compete? Well, you can go find other doctors who don't have physical therapists. How else can you compete? You will find institutions, if you can, who don't have a complete physical therapy program. You may specialize in your physical therapy into certain fields. And above all, you're going to make damn sure you give your patients the best customer service they've ever seen. Because that's the easiest way to lose them, is to make them not happy. Let me introduce a topic related to that. This wasn't necessarily on the agenda, but it is now. It's called the lifetime value. I don't know if you can even read that. Lifetime value of a customer. I have a very dear friend who's a graduate from Santa Fe and is probably our most acknowledged successful graduate that we've had from this college. His name is John Spence. He graduated here, then he graduated from Florida in public relations. He secured his first job with a Rockefeller Foundation down in Miami, and within 3 years he was running the foundation. Extremely successful. Today he travels worldwide, consulting and speaking and training with Fortune 500 companies. One of the most successful men I've ever known. Probably the most, without qualification, that I know personally. He still lives here in Gainesville. He's a close personal friend. But he has some wonderful stories, and I want to share one of them with you about this. John and his wife went to a restaurant once. They were down in Fort Lauderdale. And the restaurant treated them rather rudely. The quality of the food they were served was very poor. And John was really disappointed. He didn't get angry, but he was very disappointed. So he wrote them a letter. And he said, "My name's John Spence. I live approximately 2 miles from your restaurant. My wife and I love your restaurant. We traditionally come in there once or twice a week because we love your food and your service. We typically come in and spend, at that time, $100 a week minimum in your restaurant, frequently more. We came in last Tuesday night, and the following things happened." And he lists the way they were treated, the things that were said, the quality of the food, the attitude of the people, etc., etc. And he says, "For those reasons, we will no longer be visiting your restaurant. I want to point out to you what that's going to cost. It's going to cost you approximately 50 weeks a year. It's going to cost you $5,000 a year in revenue that we will not be bringing into your store. Over the course of the next 5 years, that means it's going to cost you $25,000 in revenue. I am fairly well connected socially in this town, and I will be sharing my story about your restaurant with approximately 50 people, of whom, let's say 20 of them, agree that they too shouldn't be coming to your store. And if they spend even only half as much as we do, that means over the next 5 years, your treatment of me Tuesday night will cost you $250,000 in revenues. Love, John." What would you do if you were the restaurant manager or owner and you got that letter?
Overhaul,
A gift card?
overhaul the restaurant.
We certainly would have a little
Every problem.
counseling, what we down south call come to Jesus talk, with some of the hired help.
Mm-hmm.
What else would you do? You'd send him a gift card?
We probably send them like a complimentary card for, or maybe 200.
He got a personal visit from the store manager and the store owner and a couple of the hired help. They brought him a huge cake, and they brought him gift cards for 10 meals, unlimited amount. Anytime you want to use them, please come back to us.
Oh,
And they did, and they were treated like royalty, and they told the positive side of that story to their friends, and the company took that very negative incident and turned it into an opportunity. But the lifetime value of a customer is sometimes something we tend to overlook because we get caught up in the moment when things are not going well. And it can be very expensive.
Important to
Let me tell you one other one John did. At one time he would go to breakfast at a bagel shop. Next door to it was a laundry, and next door to that was a dry cleaner. And he would drop his laundry off, and they'd wash it and fold it for him. He'd drop his dry cleaning off. And of course, he was traveling a bit at the time, so this was pretty important stuff. Came by one day to pick up his dry cleaning, I think it was, and he had to fly out the next day, and they said, "Hey, we don't have it. It won't be until tomorrow." He said, "No, I'm leaving tomorrow at 6 o'clock in the morning, flying out of Gainesville. I need those clothes today." "I'm sorry, we can't do anything about it." So he went home and wrote them a letter about how much money he spent there at dry cleaning. And then he took a copy of that letter and gave it to the owner of the bagel shop and the owner of the laundry and said, "I will also no longer be coming to your stores because it's no longer convenient for me to be able to come in and get breakfast and drop off my stuff. I found another place over here where I can get the dry cleaner and the laundry and the bagel shop." What do you suppose the neighbors thought about the dry cleaner? That one he sent out by email to all of his, I would guess, 500, 600, 800 people in Gainesville. John was at a restaurant, a hotel in Tucson, Arizona, about a year ago. And it was Valentine's Day, and they had set off a dining room and reserved all the tables. And he went down to get a bite to eat, and they said, "No, you can't eat here. All these tables are reserved." And it was pretty early in the evening. He said, "Well, nobody's here yet." He says, "All I want to do is just get a quick bite to eat. I'll get out of your way." "Oh, you can't do that." He got on the internet, posted a message to that on Facebook. I wrote back immediately. I wrote the hotel to the manager, and I said, I am a property owner in Tucson. My wife and I have a house out there. I said, I've just received word from my dear friend John Spence about the way he's being treated at your hotel. You may be sure that we will share this information. Within about an hour, I got a very nice email, apologetic email back, and they gave John anything he wanted. That's the power you and I have as consumers with the internet. And it's also the danger or the opportunity you and I face as a business. You can take most negative situations, overreact. Instead of a gift card, make a personal visit to his house and apologize. Set him up and say, if you'll make a reservation to come to see us next Friday night, I'll provide the limousine service. Go overboard. And you can take a really, really bad negative situation, make an opportunity out of it. Okay, that's marketing for tonight. Anything else on your mind? Any other topics? We're going to meet one more time before the exam. I suggest that for that meeting, if you want to go through that long problem, let me know if you have any problems. And take a look at problem set 4, which is all those multiple choice questions. If you've not done that, that's very much worth your time. Okay? Anything else? El tiempo es su tiempo, right? My time is your time for about another 20 or 30 minutes.
So if we go through all the problems,
If you can do those problems in your sleep, if you could stand up here and teach those problems, you're in good shape. And you want to be sure and show every step of your work and be very clear in your explanations. When I say explain something, the best thing you can do is say, well, here's a chance for me to show him everything I know, and start writing everything you know. Where people get into trouble is they don't show their work. Oh, the answer? 92. What does it mean? It means it's okay. Well, A, 92 is a wrong answer. Boom. It means it's okay. It tells me you don't know a damn thing about it. You don't know anything to say. So when I say explain something, tell me everything you can, as wide and as deep as you can go, about that topic and any related topic. If I ask you about substitutes, you can say, well, here's the right answer, and explain what substitutes you are. And then if you've got a few minutes before the end of the test, you say, hey, I got a little time here. Let me tell you about complements. Right? They have negative cross elasticities, and sometimes it's a really good idea to sell complements, because when people buy one thing, they buy the other to go with it. Blah, 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 blah. You're showing me you know more than just that little narrow question I asked. That's an A paper. By the way, that's also an A presentation in a business. Okay. Other rule is you must make a C on this exam to pass this course. If you don't make a C on this exam, you're through. What does that mean? It means it's just like doing a presentation at work. There are no do-overs. You stand up, represent my company, talk to our clients, you screw this up, bye. What do you do to get ready for that?
Keep doing the problems.
You over-prepare. If you're going to do a presentation for the company, you better come in that room with that equipment, with the PowerPoint or whatever handouts, and you better go through it 6, 7, 8 times. You want to be walking in there like a pro. Man, I've done this so often, bingo. And if you don't do that, if that's not your personal standards, you will be outcompeted by people who do have higher standards. And that's part of what I'm trying to teach in this course. Okay? Last point is, when you do all that, you make it look easy. When the boss says, damn, that was a hell of a presentation. How much time did you spend doing that? A couple of days, no sweat. Translation, 9 days, 19 hours a day. But it wasn't too bad, boss. No. You want to make it look easy. That builds your reputation. You never lose your temper, you never get angry, you never complain in public. That's professional. End of the sermon's over, I'm sorry. Anything else? It's been real. Bye.